Hello, welcome to the birth of a new dimension. My name is Aurora, and I will be your host for 1 hour while we travel mentally together here on the radio through the ocean of consciousness. So, okay, I'm going to first introduce myself in case you are new to this broadcast and new to Aurora as the person. I am a walk-in, and I am not just a walk-in or a person or consciousness who is not the original inhabitant of this physical body since it was grown as a zygote. I am a galactic walk-in in that my consciousness has stellar origins. So as opposed to let's define a soul as a consciousness between lifetimes. So I know that this is a lot to understand for some people who are starting from a standing stop. If you do not yet know about the afterlife, or if you don't believe in afterlife, or if you don't yet know that consciousness can exist independent of the human neurological structure as a carrier, then I'm here to tell you that yes, your consciousness can exist independent of the physical neurological system that contains it. So this is different than the scientific objective materialistic viewpoint that states that consciousness arises from the complexity of the system that holds it. And I am stating that consciousness exists independent of that complex system. One moment, please. So my consciousness, before it entered into this particular physical form, was existing in a hyperspace reality, in a non-corporeal reality. And although I have had other incarnations in the physical form on Earth, mostly my experiences have been as part of the floating consciousness collective that travels between star systems. And this floating consciousness collective is called heaven. So I can also define myself accurately as an angel or an angelic entity. And heaven itself, the word has been changed and mythologized in this time and place. When people say heaven, they think of pearly gates, fluffy white clouds, angels wearing long white nightgowns, and a place of severe judgment because, according to the literalist Christian tradition, only people that are judged worthy get to enter into heaven. So that's all really distorted. Heaven is actually a hyperspace entity. When I say hyperspace, I mean the room that contains the room. You're in a room right now. I'm not actually in a room. I'm actually outside on a beautiful sunny day, surrounded by redwood trees. These are like the ancient wisdom keepers and witnesses to everything that is going on underneath a beautiful blue sky. And having charged up my solar batteries, my internal power structure of the energy centers of my body, the chakras of my body, by sun gazing and exposing myself directly to the consciousness broadcast that comes from Sol, our nearest broadcaster of the galactic consciousness. And I was saying, making a distinction, that I'm a galactic walk-in as opposed to a walk-in by a soul, which is consciousness between lifetimes, whom has mostly been associated with earthly existence and Earth surface culture. So I call myself galactic because most of my experiences and how I would characterize myself or my origins as being non-earthly, even though my consciousness presence was here and quite highly interactive with Earth surface human culture before the fall of Atlantis and during High Atlantis. So during that time, there was a sophisticated worldwide culture of both earthly humanoid and earthly non-humanoid, and non-earthly humanoid and non-earthly non-humanoid culture. It's like saying right now on Earth's surface, People from China and people from Africa and people from the United States all can talk to each other on the phone, can all hop on a plane or a ship and visit one another, and can also have commerce, like trade ideas and energy. This is what it was like in High Atlantis before the degradation of the human genetic structure. Earth was a beautiful vacation spot and hub of interconnectivity of consciousness of beings from many different places and many different dimensions. And my role at that time was one of a policymaker. I was not corporeal, so I was a consciousness or an entity that existed independent of a physical neurological structure. And I was non-terrestrial in that I did not live on planet Earth, but I associated with planet Earth. It's like saying you don't live in France, but you might have a business partner in France, or you might visit there to give musical performances, or you might visit there to go to the museums and ingest some of the French culture. This is analogous to what my role was like. And I have also spoken on this radio broadcast about how Atlantis went through several different periods, just like ancient Egypt, high dynasties and then a diminishing of the culture. And there was an invasion of consciousness that caused humanity to have a degraded genetic structure, physical structure, emotional structure, ability to perceive, and social structure. And that degradation has led to pretty much the world that we see around us. And the world that you see around you is not the natural self-organization result of humans organizing themselves. The world that you see around you is the result of targeted genetic manipulation and intervention at various times throughout human culture. And the intervention and genetic manipulation all happened from non-terrestrial and sometimes extra-dimensional consciousnesses. So, hyperspace, when I define hyperspace, I'm talking about the room that contains the room. If you are listening to this broadcast from the third dimension, as I presume you are, you're sitting in a room, in a box, and you are looking at a bunch of three-dimensional objects. But here is a question for you. What is the room that contains the room? The room is on a planet. The planet is in a solar system. The solar system is part of a galaxy. The galaxy is part of a universe or a cosmos. What is the context that contains that universe or cosmos? And the answer is hyperspace. Let's get a little bit into how to build the dimensions. So you're in the third dimension. The 0th dimension is infinity. It is a dot that contains everything. It is the singularity. It is the presence of all information, all energy, and all consciousness and all possibilities. So according to science and math and fancy equations, the singularity is the place where all of these equations break down. They don't make sense anymore. They don't give out answers that have relevancy or salience. They don't make sense. So the 0th dimension is where everything begins. And the first little leap of consciousness is considering what would exist if something did not exist in the place where everything exists. That's quite a concept to have. The source, at one point, had to think to itself, what if part of me wasn't here? And that was a radical and revolutionary thought that created the first dimension. And the first dimension is a line. If you take a point and you make another point anywhere around it, you connect those 2 points with a line of points. And then you have the first dimension. And it's the first dimension not because it comes first, but because it only requires one piece of information to describe a position of consciousness along that line. So we only need to know, is it number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, heading into infinity. The next dimension is the second dimension, and it is at 90 degrees to the first dimension. This is all going somewhere. Stick with me. If you could imagine lining up a row of pencils, or if you are human and you look down at your hand and you line up all of your fingers, you can imagine that each one of those fingers is a one-dimensional line. And when you line up a bunch of one-dimensional lines, you get the second dimension. It's a plane. So a bunch of pencils or fingers or lines lined up next to one another creates a flat plane. You can envision a piece of paper. And this piece of paper, a dot on a piece of paper requires two pieces of information to describe where it is. You know, an X and a Y, or a length and a width. But we don't have height yet. Dun, 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 dun. What is 90 degrees to the second dimension? It is the third dimension. So that would be if we envisioned stacking up many pieces of paper to make a fat, thick, like brick or cube of paper. And that is the third dimension. We make the third dimension by stacking up many, many planes. And now you look around you at the room that you are in and you say, I'm familiar with this. This is the dimension I live in. This is the third dimension. And I ask you, okay, now, please point to the fourth dimension. And I'll even give you a clue. The fourth dimension is 90 degrees from your present location. And that's very difficult because you're going to try to point out the window or up to the sky or down to the ground. But it is not a spatial dimension. So the closest thing that you can do is point to a clock, because the next dimension, or what is 90 degrees to the third dimensional box that you're presently standing in, is the fourth dimension. And that means that the third dimensional box that you were standing in at 12:39 is not the same box that you were standing in at 12:40, and not the same box that you will be standing in at 12:41. Each box is a moment. Each box is like an individuated train car in a big, long train. And each train car contains a moment, and the train itself is your timeline, the line of your life. And if you notice now, we have circulated back to the first dimension, something that is in the form of a line. So the timeline that you are presently experiencing can be described by one piece of information. Are you at year 0, 1, 2, 10, 100, or infinity? Once we have entered into this realm of quote-unquote train cars of reality, that is hyperspace. That is the room that contains the room, okay? Because the room of the third dimension has to be somewhere. If 12:39 has to be next to 12:40 and has to be next to 12:41, they have to be somewhere, and the somewhere where they are is called hyperspace. And hyperspace is occupied by entities that are hyperdimensional. And this means that they perceive the tapestry of time from looking up above it. When I used to have visitors come to visit my studio and I would describe this, I would say, you, from your viewpoint of 5 or 6 feet off the ground, off of the carpet, are analogous to a hyperspace dweller. And a little ant that is walking along the surface of the carpet in my studio is analogous to a person who is occupying the third dimension and is submerged within the fourth dimension, submerged within the flow of time. So I am here submerged within the flow of time because I have a mission. All of this is backstory. Aurora introducing herself as a galactic walk-in. Why am I here? Why did I walk in? Why am I incarnated? Why have I become densified to this physical dimension? And first of all, I became densified to this physical dimension through a portal that is called the Flying Rainbow Lasagne. If you have not yet seen or experienced what the Flying Rainbow Lasagne is, easy enough to simply look at the ucy.tv/FRL homepage for Birth of a New Dimension. It is featured prominently in the banner. You can also click on the feed that comes from the Birth of a New Dimension Facebook page in order to see several artistic depictions, both sculptural and two-dimensional. And I also urge you and invite you to check out the the conception of the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. This is an original animation that I created and is available on YouTube. The conception of the Flying Rainbow Lasagna is a 5-minute original short animated film that was shown at the Bridges Film Fest. Bridges is a super cool international conference of math artists, and I fit in there somewhere. And I created it because it's an international conference, so I could not use verbalized English language and the flapping of my mouth parts to convey these ideas that I do here on the radio with nothing but the flapping of my moving mouth parts. In case you don't know, also, I'm primarily a visual artist, although I'm also a singer and a musician. It is all the harmonic language of color, line, shape, form, movement, texture, and tone. Some people would describe it as sacred geometry, but geometry is a misleading word. Geometry comes from geo, and it literally is the root word meaning earth measuring. It comes from when farmers needed to measure their fields so they could adequately and fairly divide up their crops, and is part of the beginning of agriculture and the beginning of civilization. But geometry is not an adequate word to describe the partitioning of the universe or the cosmos, or how we would measure and define and apprehend and comprehend the formal structure of the universe. So we need better language to speak about that, a more impeccable description. And this language of harmonics, or the language of color, line, shape, form, texture, movement, and tone, is an interdimensional language. If you / when you begin to meet and interact with and share consciousness with beings from other times, places, and galaxies and star systems, you will have to find a common language. And the common language is not English. Everybody in the cosmos does not speak English, although it is interesting that there are many people who appear humanoid, who might have 2 arms and 2 legs and, roughly the same facial structure of 2 eyes and one hole for speaking and breathing. The challenges in interacting with and communicating effectively with otherworldly beings is that they might be moving at a vastly different rate than you are. So these are some of the crucial questions. Birth of a New Dimension, this radio broadcast, is all about preparing Earth surface human culture for interdimensional contact. And so part of it is necessary to do yoga of the perception and to prepare yourself for how to perceive and communicate clearly and effectively with hyperdimensional beings. So this language of harmonics is the language. And for some people, they begin to perceive this language of harmonics, and it is expressed as music. I'm not sitting at my piano right now because it's a beautiful sunny day and I'm out here getting direct consciousness transmissions from the sun. But if I were at my piano, we would be able to understand that tone is an abstraction and is something that can be understood, and that it is the pattern of the differentials between each tone that makes a harmonic structure. And that same structure is being played out in the placement of planets in the solar system, the placement and size and nested proportions of the chakras in your body, the placement of energy around an atom, the formation of timelines in a hyperspace reality, and energetic structures that are so large they have not yet been perceived by little tiny humans with little tiny eyeballs. I'm talking about energetic structures that are at the size of galaxies or at the scale of galaxies. For example, black holes do emit jets of incredibly high intensity energy, and these streams of energy sometimes are millions or billions of miles long, and they connect various structures like black holes to black holes or galaxies to galaxies, and they're so large they are part of an energetic structure that has not yet been perceived by humanity because humanity is too small and is stuck to the surface of Earth, just like the little ant that is stuck to the surface of the carpet in my analogy of my studio. That little ant is stuck to the surface of time. So when science talks about time, science describes the mythological erstwhile Big Bang. This is cosmology. This is the story of where you came from. It's not necessarily a true story. It's just a story. The industrialized Western culture might look down upon the stories of another culture that is native or aboriginal that describes the cosmology of the universe and where you came from. They're both equal, both equally valid perceptions. And you will say, no, Aurora, I'm a scientific objective materialist and they are not equally valid perceptions because science has built a large apparatus and launched it into interstellar space in order to perceive cosmic rays, and science does calculations and proves with empirical evidence the cosmology that they believe in, as opposed to native wisdom or an aboriginal elder who has that wisdom from not building a telescope artificial apparatus. But I'll tell you two things. Native peoples, non-industrialized, non-Western cultures, have their own very sophisticated, quote-unquote, Hubble Space Telescope. It is analogous to the third eye, or the chakra of insight and perception that resides at the brow, and the crown chakra is also activated in connecting to the source. Shamans are like telescope operators of the ancient and aboriginal world. The shamans would look through their apparatus at the cosmos and learn from what they see and develop a story and then come back and share that information with the rest of, quote-unquote, the tribe. This is what scientists do in this time and place on Earth's surface. They have a very special apparatus that all of society has contributed towards the building and manifestation and functioning of that apparatus. And then scientists look through that apparatus and they share what they interpret and they share what they perceive with, quote-unquote, the rest of the tribe, which is a story called the Big Bang Theory. And in the Big Bang Theory, there once was a dot. That was the zeroth dimension. That was the singularity. That was the presence of all energy and consciousness and awareness and all possibilities and all probabilities and all forces and all particles. And one day it just expanded. And this is very similar to what I was teaching you with the idea of the first dimension, the creation of the first dimension. At one point, the presence of everything and the source of everything had to think, what would happen if I wasn't here, if a little piece of me was over there? It had to think over there. And in the thought process of thinking over there was created, and so was the integument, or the connecting line between over here and over there. So science describes this cosmology as an explosion of energy from the Big Bang outward, and that this is the emanation of time, that there's an ever-expanding time bubble, and that we as humans, and I hesitate to use that word, and I even started to think Earth surface human culture, how can I describe the occupants of the time that science describes? But science would say that that is all of the time in the universe is on the surface of that bubble, and that is made of super stretchy infinity fabric and is infinitely expanding. And all of the information that is inside of the bubble would be considered the past, and all of the information that is on the outside of the bubble, science does not even recognize. Isn't that interesting? Science says it hasn't happened yet, therefore it doesn't exist. So science looks at the cosmos as an ever-expanding bubble of time where you occupy the surface of that bubble, but where there's no context. And I've just spoken to you about hyperspace as being context, the room that contains the room. If you want to have a line of train cars, you have to have a train station. And hyperspace is the train station where all of the train cars line up. And not only do you have one train line, but you have a multiplicity of train lines. You have many parallel realities. So you can now envision either many parallel train tracks, or if you're human, put your hand together and look down at your hand and look at all of the fingers of your hand, and you could say that each finger is like a timeline or a parallel reality. And you could say that the middle finger is like a central reality, and as you get towards the pinky and towards the thumb, towards the periphery, you get further and further away from the events and the likelihood of that central reality. And this is pretty much the structure of your corporeal existence. I always draw the time vortex, and you can refer to this image on the Birth of a New Dimension page, feed from Facebook page. There's a sketch there that looks kind of like a circus tent or a yurt in cross-section, and that central tent pole or central yurt pole would be the core possibility. I call it the path of least likelihood because there is only one of those timelines in the extremely intensely varied structure of the timelines of your life, or the time vortex that you reside within, or it is also analogous to an old-fashioned analog record. You know, like a record that you play on a record player with a needle. That is essentially one extremely long spiral line that spirals from the outside perimeter of the record to the inside where the spindle is. And you, as consciousness, are analogous to the needle on the record. And you are playing the song of your life. And the song of your life is not just the song of this present combination of decisions that has led you to this moment. It is the combination of every single possible set of possibilities that can lead you in any direction. So we all make decisions in our lives, and those decisions are like the hand on the steering wheel of our life that make us go in one direction or another. And the determining factor of where your awareness, where the needle on the record, what song is being played, is choice and consciousness. And this is a tough concept to embody, because we also are submerged within context. And although we may be making choices, we are also impacted, and we have to work within the context of events of reality. So it is also like saying time is a tapestry, and you, on your one timeline, are just one thread that is woven throughout this much larger tapestry. And in order for you to fit harmoniously, you have to fit with the overarching pattern. In fact, that's what the word harmonics is all about. The overarching pattern that governs energy as it is flowing. So all of the paintings and artwork and sculptures and animations that I do are all depictions of this energetic framework. There is a structure to hyperdimensional reality that governs the behavior of energy and particles and the matter of the material world as it is assembled into the material world. You could call it the grain, like the grain of wood. It is a pattern of energy, and it is a pattern of consciousness. And this pattern is the language of color, line, shape, form, movement, texture, and tone. And when you conform to the pattern, that is called health and vitality. And when you diverge from the pattern, that is called decrepitude and death. All right? The membrane of death is a flowing membrane or barrier between worlds, in much the same way that a tornado is created just by the whirling and swirling action of atmosphere amidst itself. The membrane of death is created by the whirling and swirling action of time/consciousness and awareness swirling amidst itself. The membrane of death is a focuser of awareness, in that it is selecting for certain personality characteristics, behaviors, belief systems, and choices. So to use the analogy of quote-unquote the record of your life, and you are playing the song of your life, and as you spiral inward from the periphery, you become more and more in alignment or in tune with not only your true self, like the true set of characteristics that represents aspects of your consciousness with the least amount of distortion, and you also become in alignment with the harmonic vibration of the great thinker, because you are a tiny particle of consciousness circulating within a great mind. You could think that it's analogous to being a neuron in a great brain, but really the sun would be analogous to a neuron. You're not even at the level of a neuron. You're at the level of a tiny little neurotransmitter that jumps the neuron, the synaptic gap, the area in between neurons. And that moment of jumping the synaptic gap and making it across that area is analogous to the moment of ascension. What a lovely segue into the present moment that we are in. And we are like a beautiful, fertile, pregnant woman who is just about to give birth. Like that is where we are cosmically as a planet and as consciousness. There has been a great deal of gestation and a great deal of preparation for this moment. This is also why I call this show, this radio broadcast, Birth of a New Dimension. It is based upon a painting, and I've been working on this painting since 2012. That doesn't mean I've been painting on it every day for the past, 3 or 4 years. It means that I drew the basic drawing, and any painting that I do, before I do the actual drawing in ink, I do extensive pencil drawings on paper. And so the reason why I did it is because artwork, when it is done intentfully, can be a powerful way to manifest events. And these were all events that I wished to see and experience. So to give you a little bit of an idea of the narrative structure of the painting, in the foreground, there is a male and female figure in two Merkabahs that are joined together. So they are like a twin Merkabah, and these are twin flames. And directly above them, there is a crystal that is an octahedron. And this is a allegorical depiction of the Merkabah, which is a star tetrahedron, morphing into its higher dimensional state, which is one of an octahedron. P.S. I go into this extensively in my online course called Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. We are already knee-deep into the semester. It's a little bit too far to catch the train on this one, but just know that it exists, and the semester will come around in June and in September. And if this information interests you, please visit my website, flyingrainbowlasagna.com, and click on the online course tab where you can read the full syllabus and find out about all the goodies. And you can even buy the recorded lessons as a DVD box set and prepare. You can do your homework in advance for next semester. But in the direct center of the painting, there is an extraterrestrial face, and the male and female figures with their rainbow chakras are converging like parallel lines that converge at infinity at the focal point of the extraterrestrial face. And up above that, there is a depiction of Earth, the planet, cracking in half the way you crack an egg to make your eggs in the morning. And out of the center, instead of a yolk, is a figure that is standing inside of a flying rainbow lasagna. And surrounding this upper portion of the painting are some very dimensionally painted extraterrestrial rainbow faces. And when I say dimensionally painted, I have two different types of paint that I work with. One is very flat and glossy and pools out into a brushless, glossy surface. And one is very thick and almost like honey or toothpaste. And I use that to make these very high dimensional dots. And it's one of my favorite parts of the painting. It's like icing the cake. It's like putting the final finishing touches on. And these dots literally stick up into the third dimension, and they add a wonderful texture and a wonderful sense of the energy of those presences. All of this, some of my paintings are scholarly. They are investigations, almost like an equation, like A plus B divided by C with a dash of D thrown in equals question mark. And then I do that in order to find out what question mark looks like. This is a different type of painting that I'm describing to you. Birth of a New Dimension is a narrative painting, and it is an emotional manifestation painting, and it is about these events. So the events are about myself and my twin flame uniting, myself and Christ consciousness uniting, the uniting of the divine feminine and divine masculine presences within in myself as an individual, and many couples and earth surface human cultural examples, and a connection or reconnection of extraterrestrial and extra-dimensional consciousness with consciousness on Earth, as Earth and her magnetic form, or, the magnetosphere, shifts and morphs into the shape of a flying rainbow lasagna, all right? As so too does my own personal energy field. So all of these events, of course, sound quite magnificent, and wouldn't we all like to be experiencing them immediately or before breakfast on next Tuesday? Like this... Literally, this painting came from a vision. When I introduce myself, I say I'm a galactic walk-in. I always say I'm a visionary artist because I literally paint from my inner vision. And so that means that I see these paintings as completed evidence, and it's almost like stealing them from the future. I see them, and then I have to translate them into the materials that I have at hand. So I saw these events and this world and this painting structure, and then I did the drawing for it in 2012. And I wanted the events to happen in 2012. I wanted an instantaneous shift on a planetary level into higher consciousness and extraterrestrial life to overtly contact Earth surface humans. Like, I had a lot of expectations. And I also had several other paintings that I did the line drawing for at the same time, because this is a lot of what my day is like, what my life is like. When there's energy for inspiration and for creating new projects, I really capitalize upon it. So I had the desire to begin at least 4 new paintings, and I did the drawings for them all at once. And that was high summer in 2012. And setting up the drawing process is like very active. It's very creative. The process of of actually painting all of those lines that I have drawn and all the tiny little circles that I've drawn then takes months and months and months, and is highly meditative. And the act of actually creating the line drawing is like a dance. It's very athletic. Like, I move around a lot. I put on very active music. I'm very inspired. I usually am very inspired by the sunlight and get inspiration in the summertime. So this was from summer 2012, and I was inspired to do the drawing for 4 different paintings, one of which is Birth of a New Dimension that I was just describing to you. And I realized and recognized that I had to do the work and actually do the painting of the other 3 paintings. And so these are Merkaba Chakra 1 and Merkaba Chakra 2, and then Vessel. And those are abstractions. They are not depictions that include the anthropomorphic human form. And they were concomitant with doing lessons for full spectrum humans as a formal presentation and putting together several semesters worth of groups of people, because I had to learn that it was not just about these abstract concepts, it was about the synergy of people coming together and listening to these concepts and then sharing their own ideas and adding their own flavor to the broth. And I understood also that the events that I drew in the painting weren't ready to unfold. And sometimes I can be very goal-oriented, like, oh, this should happen on this day, let's make it happen. But as an artist, I have to respect the creative process. The creative process is very much like the act of lovemaking and or physical procreation and birth. It has its own logic, it has its own time scale, and it has its own inevitability. And it does not do very much to try to speed it up or slow it down. Like, no matter how much you say to a pregnant lady, like, get going on that, like, the baby is going to take 9 months in order to gestate. So the gestation process of this birth of a new dimension has taken years. It has taken a long time. It has been about preparing human consciousness, or Earth surface human consciousness, preparing humans for a change in social structure. Like, here is one huge telling example. When I first came into this body, it was 2001, and when I first started to really interact with human society on Earth, it was 2003. And at that time, it was immediately, this is just post 9/11, people were driving around with not one but 2 American flags waving on their cars. Everybody had yellow ribbons and said support the troops. People were buying extremely large, gas-inefficient cars called Hummers. This was a car that was made by General Motors before General Motors went out of business because they were building these hugely inefficient cars that weren't affordable to buy and run. But people thought, this is the end of the world. I need to buy a car that's built like a tank and guzzles tons of gas, all right? And people were also buying and building, quote-unquote, McMansions, extremely large, unwieldy, cumbersome houses with, these balloon mortgages. This is 2003. A mere 5 years later, those balloon mortgages would pop hideously, sending the real estate market into a tailspin, or quote-unquote correction, and negatively affecting Wall Street, negatively affecting the entire financial structure of the country, and even internationally it had repercussions. One moment, please. And of course, add to that, throw in a dash of political paranoia in terms of fear of terrorism and willingness to give up personal rights and privacy due to the Patriot Act. And you have a realm that is very, very different than a lot of the value system that I'm so happy to see growing and being cultivated here now. So now we have the tiny homes movement. People have decided in their retirement, or sometimes young people just starting out, just emerging in their 20s and establishing themselves, don't want to be saddled with huge, ungainly mortgage payments. People don't also recognize that they don't require a large, formal entryway and a 3-story foyer and a huge walk-in closet. Like, so much of the accoutrements of the McMansion had to do with a lavish lifestyle that was not necessarily desired by the populace, but was programmed in as a set of desires. And it was programmed in by media. If you ever have seen the TV show Cribs or any of the E-network, I'm just collecting my words here, television shows that exalt people that have a high degree of physical wealth and will take you on a walk through their house in order to put on a pedestal people that are living in that way. So this was a form of social programming that said, this is a desirable way to live and you should aspire to it. But now people are reclaiming their own desires and saying, what do I really desire? And many people are desiring a life that is simple and has greater quality. And when I say quality, let's define this as quality of consciousness, because it is not a high quality of consciousness to be stuck working at a 40-hour work week with a 1 or 2 hour commute in order to earn enough money running on the hamster wheel to pay for the mortgage of the giant McMansion and the giant gas-guzzling Hummer. I am happy to note these changes in cultural values because this is necessary for like preparing a garden. You don't just plant seeds in a garden. You have to take time to prepare the soil and then plant the seeds at the right time. So Earth surface human consciousness has been cultivated and prepared for about the past decade, so that now people are much more interested in having a tiny house, and a tiny mobile house that you can pull with either an electric car or a hybrid vehicle, sustainable living, a place where you can grow your own food, the idea of food, not lawns. That is revolutionary. And all of these changes have been necessary in order to prepare humans for what will be a social revolution. And part of this revolution is a change in perception and values. We will not still have private property as we currently know it. So, the idea of, well, let's just say that the area around our homes will be a cultivated garden of wild-crafted food that we will all share openly. And this is part of, again, a change in human culture and values. The idea of living happily in a gated community and having an abundance of food while just outside of your gates there are angry, hungry people is no longer considered a viable or sustainable pathway for, I would say, many of the people that are on the timeline that I am occupying. And we can also talk now about which timelines are being occupied, because there are a diverse array of parallel timelines. Many of them diverge from 2011 and the moment of Fukushima. That is a crucial node or branching off point of events. And I will tell you that, if your hand is like a bunch of parallel timelines, over towards the thumb, there are some horrible possibilities of worldwide social collapse, total irradiation, humans losing their immune system and reproductive system, and human consciousness would change and morph and still be alive, but what it would turn into would be a truly distorted and diminished version of what it could be and what it should be. Kind of like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, a underground, twisted, pale, psychotic, disconnected version of what humans could be, which is connected to source. Let's talk about the opposite of the thumb, the complete antithesis, the pinky. All of the timelines that are parallels in that world are timelines of peace, prosperity, connection of Earth surface humans to higher source consciousness, and the beautiful society and cultural value system that would be an expression of being connected to source. So I was speaking, I think, on last week's episode about my wonderful journey to Mount Shasta, which is a couple of 100 miles away from where I live in California, in the Northern California area. But I certainly live within the penumbra of the mountain and the Agarthans, the Agarthan culture, also known as the inner earth beings, this culture of ascended masters. They have a wonderful cultural value system that is based on, not on competition, but rather on collaboration. And they are truly a society where a person with a vivid imagination is a wealthy and well-respected person. So the type of civilization that Earth surface humans could, can, will, and shall create is much more analogous to the Agarthan culture. It is one of you do not have to act out of fear because there is an abundance of resources, and those resources are created with the mind. So this is the next level up. And we'll talk about this, the quantum leap. So, when people talk about the quantum leap, and quantum is such a catchword in the quote-unquote New Age community, what does it mean? In an actual atom, there is the nucleus, and then around the nucleus there are spherical shells of probability. Just like you exist within a quote-unquote train yard of many different train timelines, so too does that little negative electron exist within a field of possibilities. And due to the difficulty of observership, this is also known as Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. It has been shown in the double slit experiment. It has been considered in Schrödinger's cat theory. The idea that simply observing one of these tiny subatomic particles affects it. That you are making things happen with your perception. So this is a very crucial thing to understand, that objective materialists and science-minded people of the current time and place on Earth's surface do not necessarily respect the difficulty of observership, and what you are looking at and observing is fulfilling your wishes and behaving in the way that you wish it to expect. And when I was on the mountain visiting Mount Shasta, I had some wonderful experiences of incongruous events that shouldn't have been able to happen in reality, but it did happen in reality. And it happened because my mind manifested it. In one time, my window of my car was able to roll up, even though the keys weren't in the ignition. And so technically the car shouldn't have been working, but it did work because I believed that it was working because I thought that the keys were in the ignition. So these magical occurrences and I would define a magical occurrence as an event that does not have the integument to tie it to reality, quote unquote. These have been happening, these can happen, these will happen more and more. And we will move into a realm that is entirely created or manifested by our minds. We will also move into an era where we will be able to eat light directly. So this is pretty big because so many of Earth's surface humans' concerns come from food, having to feed the belly, really. And concerns over money are really just projected concerns over food, because in this time and place, having food means having money. And if you do not have money in general, you do not have food. So in order to prepare the garden for new seeds of consciousness, I am here spreading these ideas of that it's possible to shift from being a corporeal human who eats corporeal objects to being a semi-corporeal or light human that consumes and ingests pure light. And this is what I teach in Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. It's why it's called Full Spectrum Humans. So being able to eat light is a mental program. It's not like being able to run a marathon is a mental program. But when you run that mental program, the first part of the program is you have to run every day and train your muscles to be prepared to run one day 26 miles, right? The mental program for how to run a marathon is not you wake up one morning and just run 26 miles from a dead stop. This is the same thing with how to live off of pure sunlight. You don't just start from a standing stop. You have to cultivate your energy. Just like running a marathon means you have to cultivate your muscles. You have to do it every day. And the more that you do it, the better you become at it. The more that you do it, the more endurance you have. And eventually, you have enough endurance to keep going and finish the marathon. So the Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, first of all, gives you just the concept that these maneuvers can be performed, that this lifestyle can be achieved, and then tells you, now here is what you do. You have to start meditating like this. You have to start cultivating your light body or accreting light like this. And some of the practices have to do with meditation, mindfulness, or achieving a, silence, inner silence, and not fueling the verbalized dialogue. It's about unhacking your hacked operating system of your mind. Eating mindfully means not allowing the physical energy and the light that is in the physical food that you eat to be stolen and hijacked by lower vibrational service to self negative thought entities that occupy the interstices. These are like beings that don't have a mouth and they can't eat food, so they want to eat your food, but they can eat your food, so they just eat your enjoyment. Don't let them eat your enjoyment, and don't let them steal your joy during your day. Whenever you're in bliss, whatever you're doing that gives you bliss, if it is running, or if it's taking a hot shower, or if it's painting, or if it is playing the piano, or if it is making love, or if it is petting your cat, if you're in bliss, Don't allow those restrictive thoughts of doubt, fear, and insecurity to take you out of bliss. Don't respond to them. Say no thank you and continue to be in wordless, direct consciousness communion, telepathic rapport. That is this consciousness state that we are meant to be in. So also, I have noticed a big change and shift in human consciousness, the quality of what is being cultivated and broadcast by Earth surface humans. When people talk about the event, capital T, capital E, I'm talking about like New Age channelers, and I'll also get into how, I am not a channeler, and I do not mean to cast aspersions, but I will tell you that I am my own higher self speaking through this conduit of this physical density. And I will invite you all to claim your own higher self in that way. It is lovely that you want to give your real estate to Kuan Yin and have Kuan Yin be like your roommate. I'm sure that is a lovely roommate. But from my experiences interacting with the Ascended Masters, they really do not want me to give them credit for my life. They say, please take credit for your own triumphs and for your own disasters. They really say, we don't want to tell you what to do. When I interact, and here's the litmus test for ascendancy. When I interact with the Ascended Masters, they might point me in the right direction of certain crucial, like cosmological information, or they might teach it to me directly, but they don't take credit as being the originators of the information. They're just the teacher that happens to hold that information at that point. Very different than an egotistical earth teacher who might say, well, I'm your math teacher. I know all about this equation. I have known about this equation for 10 years, and you have only known about this equation for 10 minutes because I just told it to you. Therefore, I am better than you. That level of condescension and egoic tendencies does not exist in the world of the Ascended Masters. So Ascended Masters are very happy to share information. They do not take credit for things that they are not truly the responsible originators of. They give credit to the large network of consciousness that they are connected to and that they are deriving from. And they also wish to cultivate you or me or anyone in a state of sovereignty, to say, I just want you to be the best you that you can be, or to be like the best creative version of yourself. So it is the end of this hour. I know that we ranged far and wide on these topics. Thank you for tuning in, and please continue to cultivate your consciousness and prepare for these new seeds, these new events to be planted as we are giving birth to a new dimension. Thank you.